Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome once again to the Karen Bashford Empowerment Mentored Show. But today we're talking, as we have been for quite a while, about the application of an amazing toolkit created by Karen to help groups of people or single people to ask questions and perhaps get answers about how they are, what they are, where they should go next, and how they can reach into themselves and find the answers they're looking for. Because, as I think Karen would agree, most of the answers are already there. They're just covered up in layers of trauma, distrust, etc. Today's topic follows in that pattern about talking about patterns. What do you mean by that, Karen?
If you review your life, you'll find there are patterns that repeat. And when I say patterns, it can be how you behave, things that have occurred that seem to recur at certain points in your life. Like, for instance, for me, the birth of my sister was a pattern because it then meant there was somebody else I had to cope with in my life who potentially would take attention away from me. And that impacted how I felt about myself. Now, don't get me wrong, I adored my little sister, absolutely adored her. But the impact that I felt for having somebody else in my life, based on the fact I never really felt loved, there was somebody else who is now there who potentially would take the one thing that I was missing away from me even more, because obviously a baby needs a lot of attention. So, even if I got some attention, it was going to be reduced. And as a child, I didn't realize quite how much that was impacting me because I didn't know what I know now. All I knew is what I felt less than I had.
When you're young, your world is just how you find it around you, isn't it? It's quite blinkered, and I suppose the sucker that you find in your youth comes from the intention that is either showered or not showered on you by your parents and your peer group, your relatives.
Yeah.
And I suppose, being as we're naturally competitive animals, if only competing for love and affection, if somebody comes along, not of your making and not of your asking, but it's been placed within the mix, your primitive brain at that stage is just thinking, I have certain quantile of love and affection pointed in my direction, and this new individual could potentially take some of that. So of course suddenly there's a competition for that. So that creates I don't want to say negative feelings, but certainly feelings.
It does create negative. Yeah, well, you do create negative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But now, as you've grown older and you've got your perspective has increased and all the rest of it, and this is in accordance with discussions we had in the green room, has this created still vestiges of trauma, almost shadows of a former want, a former need? I mean, I wouldn't say you're desperate for attention, affirmation and confirmation now, but
it still has an impact. It still has an impact.
Those hidden shadows in the background wanting resolution. I guess that's what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And whilst it wasn't necessarily family that the problems kept reoccurring, but it was friends. If a new friend come into the circle, it changed the dynamics. So my insecurity of not feeling loved would play out, because obviously if there's another person within the dynamic of a friendship, that alters the attention. And it's not that I was actually seeking attention. It was just that this person had been part of my life, and suddenly there was somebody new in, and that had changed the dynamics. So our conversations were different because there was a third party, or we didn't speak so often because they were spending time with the other person and things like that. So yeah, and they're the kind of patterns that can occur. And if you look at your life and review your life, it can be something really simple that you have no idea is going to be playing out in the background. So you will find that you respond to things in a specific way. That would be classed as a pattern. Because if you look back at why you started that original behavior, it was probably a form of protection of something that happened in childhood or as you were getting older. Even
Right.
I'm still conscious of the fact, even after all the years, well, the last 3 years, definitely, of working on myself at such a deep level, that if a dynamic changes, it's like it has an impact on me.
Well, it's ripples in the pond, isn't
In
it?
a different way.
It's ripples in the pond. Just because you're not right next to the stone that drops in doesn't mean you don't feel the ripple. And I think extending this still further, I've got a question to ask you. If you don't resolve those kind of issues, if you don't face them and work through them, does that mean it stays there in the background, potentially affecting other parts of your life for as long as you let it?
Yeah, well, as you and I just had a conversation, as you say, in the green room, I am working through something that has literally knocked me for 6. I'm still doing my life, but emotionally, I'm not doing very well. And that is because I've decided that my health is my top priority at the moment.
Has to be.
I have altered things in my life. In altering certain things in my life, I have then realized that it's triggered a need to deal with an issue. And that's a pattern that's come up. And interestingly enough, while we were talking earlier on, I actually pulled a set of Sloth and Beaver in this instance.
Okay. And what was the card?
It's the health ones. It's the health sets I've chosen. And this is why I say, whatever set you use, the only card that comes out will be relevant to you at the time.
All right.
So
now,
I was
before you go any further, we need to, for people, welcome, by the way, if this is your first time hearing us talk about Sloth or Beaver, but let's quickly talk about what it is you're referring to. So what is the card you pulled, and why is it that there are cards involved, and just the very basics of what Sloth or Beaver is, and then let's go back to the card you actually pulled.
Sloth or Beaver is a toolkit that basically is a life map, and a physical life map that takes you on the path from birth to death. And there are stages within that journey that are highlighted on the board. Now, Sloth is the creature that comes with you from the moment you're conceived up until death. It never leaves. And they're all your beliefs, behaviors, habits, anything to do with what you have programmed into your mind and body through your actions.
Personal framework, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a personal framework. And then Beaver is the one that clears and then helps you build. So you're always going to have Sloth, but at some point in your life, you'll invite Beaver in to start clearing. And with Beaver in place, you can then start to build the life that you want, or just change things that reflect more of who you are rather than who you've been.
I mean, the interesting thing is, I know, using that analogy, I've known people who at some point in their life have just basically put Beaver out to pasture a bit and just sat there wallowing in their sloth and nothing more. I think anyone
listening, done it.
Yes, exactly. And I suppose it's always there, isn't it? Beaver's always there to reactivate it. to make change, to clear paths, to
Yeah.
build new parts of your life. You know, I suppose Sloth is the one that muses about what happens if I could do this, and Beaver is the one that said, right, if you want it, let's go for it.
Well, that's what's happening with me now. I've had Sloth triggered. Basically, Sloth's come up and said, yeah, I know what's wrong with you. And Beaver's come along and said, well, let's get rid of you.
That's right.
Sloth isn't having it. Hence why I am in the emotional situation I am in at the moment.
All right, let me just cap this. Sloth of Beaver is a toolkit created by sweet Karen Bashwood here. Its purpose is to allow people to focus on what has happened, what will happen in the form of a life path, represented on a board. I mean, the board is notional, but gives you the idea of constant forward movement. You start off with Sloth, and at some point you invite Beaver in, which is on making the change. Because let's face it, when you're young and you're just learning and you're in your blinkered state, you don't necessarily have a direction. I mean, some people do. I've met 6-year-olds who want to be astronauts. Fair enough. But mostly, a 6-year-old just wants to play, and that's quite right. At some point in your life, you'll suddenly say, I want to achieve this. I want to conquer that. I want to learn this. I want to do that. And that's where Beaver comes in and says, right, you want to do it? This is what we're going to do. Let's get on with it.
Yeah.
And this covers all sorts of things. Now, the toolkit by default comes with one set of cards. What's the default set of cards it comes with?
You get to choose your choice.
And there are six different sets of cards. Would you tell us what those cards are and what they represent, please?
You have health, you have money mindset, you have life, you have intimate relationships, you have relationships, and you have business.
Right. And the truth of the matter is, you can never really stop the learning or the process. It's completely ongoing. So you can, although notionally you have a life path mapped out on this, you never really get to the end because there's always different parts into it. Now, going back to what initiated this talk about Sloth or Beaver, you've been hit by the realization that there is emotional trauma that you haven't yet worked through. I would say put to bed, but more like understood and made space for. So your Beavers come and said, right, we know what that is. Let's get it done. Yeah. So what you've done as a next stage is to live by the sword, die by the sword. You pull the card from the health. What would you read it? Sorry.
Yeah, what we don't realize is when we're going through a challenge, our emotions are often impacted, and when our emotions are impacted, our health is then impacted.
Yeah.
And I chose health because I am very conscious that how I'm feeling at the moment is having a massive impact on my health. Hence why I chose health. But I could have chosen life. It would have still brought up a question that had been relevant. But the thing about the cards are, if you shuffle them, either you'll pick the card that's most relevant for you, or one will fall out. In this case, this one fell out, which is interesting.
Would you read it to me, please?
Of course. It says, congratulations. Reflecting on your life has deepened your sense of self as an independent force. Solitude in moderation is a gift to be appreciated and cultivated in order to appreciate what you have fully. Solitude grants us the opportunity to quieten the noise in our heads to hear our intuition. Is independence comforting, refreshing, motivational, or otherwise positively present in your life? How do you feel about freedom in solitude?
Well, that's an
Now,
interesting one.
based on what I told you earlier on,
Right.
that's why I say, and just for anyone interested, I actually am conscious of the fact that at the moment I feel very, very lonely. So consequently, that comes partly from childhood, partly from the relationships I've been through, partly because of where I live is a very isolated place. So even just to go out to see anyone, there isn't, because I live in the middle of the countryside. So I can literally go for days without seeing anyone at all. Obviously, I can speak to people on Zoom and phone calls and such like that, but that's not the same as a physical presence.
I realize that. I realize that.
So this card is very, very relevant because I'm talking about my independence, but in solitude. And I love being on my own. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't have moved here if I didn't. I would have said no. But at the same time, there is so much solitude that you still have to be with people.
Yes, it's a delicate balance, isn't it? I mean, I'm being an autistic gentleman, and I get very triggered by lots of people, and especially now I've moved out of London. I also live in the middle of no flipping where. I can go for days without seeing people. I hide in my office, creating music, doing design work, or talking to people like yourself. But I don't actually have any physical contact. And, I do desperately miss it sometimes. And it can be deleterious to your health by not being physically present with other people. So, yeah, it's a very absent card. It's literally... So, okay, what is your reaction to that questioning?
Well, obviously, because I am working through what I'm working through, I'm very much aware that solitude in its own way is good for me because it allows me to just work through what's going on. At the same time, it's also making me very conscious of a pattern I have created, that even when I feel lonely, I'm still likely to pull myself in to being on my own, because that's how I handle my life. I prefer to do things for myself, not because I'm not prepared to reach out and ask, but because that is how I handle my life, because I'm very conscious of the fact that quite often I will learn things that enable me to grow far beyond what the experience I'm going through would have normally been.
All right. Well, look, I think I need to just talk a little bit about Sloth or Beaver. Sloth or Beaver, you can see down the bottom. If you can travel there, you'll find that it's available for you right now. You can buy it with one kit, with one set of cards. There's more available. The whole unit goes for £70. Did I get it right?
£75 for the ball and one set of cards.
Absolutely.
And that's free postage in the UK, so you're not paying any more.
Absolutely. And you can always go back and top up and get extra cards, and they're £25 a pop. As I said, extremely good at asking yourself the questions, some of which you may have been avoiding asking, but know they need to be asked, if I can be blunt about it. I'm also going to do one extra thing. If you notice at the top there where it says Sloth or Beaver, look like magic, we've got a QR code there. So if you want, that will also take you to Sloth or Beaver. So those of you on the computer, grab your phones, take a quick scan of that and have a look through, please. You should also note that outside of Sloth or Beaver, Karen also is very much an empowerment mentor to help you get back on track or even accelerate where you are existing on the tracks you are on. And if you want to do that and find out more about how she can help you with that, visit her website, KarenBashford.com, and start your empowerment wellness journey today. Thank you so much, Karen, as ever. I mean, I love our talks, but, they don't always necessarily have to feel happy, because we are a combination of all emotions, and they come out when they come out, I guess. And but I would say it's an enlightening experience, because I realize that there is sunlight on the other side. I think part of this is you need a certain level of persistence to get through. So, because you have to keep telling yourself there is good stuff on the other side, but you've got to work through the bits in between. And part of that is asking yourself questions, some of which are more difficult than others. And then
I would also say here that even though I'm going through what I'm going through, there are moments where I can appreciate the benefit of going through what I'm going through. So there are positives, even though at the moment it feels like I'm walking through mud. There are positives to the experience.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you all for taking the time out to be with us today. We will be back here next week talking more sloth or beaver and how it can relate to your life. But until then, please keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and try and look after your mental health. Until next week, bye-bye.
Bye.